Tonight, under the cold moon, she's stripped of her pack status, mocked, rejected, utterly alone. But destiny has plans for the wolf everyone dismissed. The silver light cast harsh shadows across the ceremonial grounds as Aria Blackwood knelt in the center of the pack circle, her knees grinding into the frost-hardened earth. 300 pairs of eyes bore down on her, their collective disappointment a suffocating weight that made her lungs burn with each shallow breath. Aria Blackwood. Alpha Marcus Steele's voice boomed across the clearing, though she couldn't bring herself to look up at him. Not when shame coursed through her veins like liquid fire. For the third consecutive moon ceremony, you have failed to complete your shift. The Crescent Moon Pack cannot afford weakness. A ripple of whispers spread through the gathered wolves like wildfire. Someone snickered. Another muttered, pathetic, just loud enough for her enhanced hearing to catch. Each word was a blade between her ribs. Chapter 1. The humiliation had started 3 hours ago, when Aria stepped into the sacred circle with hope fluttering in her chest like a caged bird. 23 years old and still unable to complete a full transformation, she was the pack's greatest embarrassment, a wolf who couldn't be a wolf. "Look at her," sneered Melissa Carver, the beta's daughter, her voice carrying across the ceremonial grounds with intentional cruelty. "Still thinks she belongs here." Aria's hands trembled as she pressed them against the cold earth, trying to summon the change that had always eluded her. Around the circle, pack members began their own transformations with fluid grace, bones lengthening, muscles rippling, for sprouting like silver moonlight given form. The air filled with a familiar symphony of shifting, the wet pop of joints realigning, the whisper of clothing falling away, the deep, primal growls of wolves greeting their other selves. But Aria remained stubbornly, humiliatingly human. "Please," she whispered to the moon, to the goddess, to anyone who might listen. Her fingernails scraped against stone and dirt as she fought to feel even the faintest stirring of her wolf. Nothing. The emptiness inside her yawned wider, a void where her other half should be. From somewhere behind her, she heard her stepmother's sharp intake of breath. Regina Blackwood had never hidden her disappointment in her late husband's daughter. Martin would be so ashamed, she'd hissed earlier. His bloodline reduced to this. The pack's collective energy shifted, and Aria knew without looking that Alpha Steel was approaching. His presence was like standing too close to a bonfire. Overwhelming, dangerous, impossible to ignore. She'd felt drawn to his power since she was old enough to understand what an alpha meant to a pack, though she'd never dared hope someone like him would notice someone like her. "Aria." His voice was gentler now, but somehow that made it worse. Pity was a poison she couldn't stomach. "Stand up." She forced herself to rise on unsteady legs, finally meeting his eyes. Marcus Steele was everything an alpha should be, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of commanding presence that could make armies kneel or lovers weep. His dark hair caught the moonlight, and his gray eyes held depths she'd spent years trying to read. But tonight, she saw only disappointment reflected back at her. "The pack has been patient," he continued, his words careful and measured. "But patience has limits." "I know." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I'm trying." "Trying isn't enough." Elder Thompson stepped forward, his ancient face creased with disapproval. "The Crescent Moon Pack has protected these lands for over 2 centuries. We cannot risk our strength for one who brings none to offer." "She's not even really one of us," someone called from the crowd. "Her mother was human. Tainted blood will always show." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Aria's mother had died when she was born, complications from a difficult pregnancy that left her father a widower and Aria motherless. She'd grown up hearing whispers about her human heritage, about whether she was truly pack. Alpha Steel raised a hand for silence, and the crowd immediately obeyed. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of law. "Aria Blackwood, by the authority vested in me as Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, you are hereby stripped of your pack privileges. You will move to the outer territory. You will not participate in hunts, ceremonies, or pack matters. You have 1 lunar cycle to prove your worth, or face permanent exile." The world tilted beneath her feet. Outer Territory, the borderlands where rogues and outcasts scraped out lonely existences. Where wolves went to be forgotten. Please, she found herself saying, though her voice sounded strange and distant in her own ears. I just need more time. Time is what we've given you. His expression remained impassive, but she caught something flickering in his gray eyes. Regret, perhaps. Or was she imagining it? The decision is final. As the pack began to disperse, muttering among themselves about her disgrace, Aria stood frozen in the center of the circle. The moon continued its silent vigil overhead, beautiful and cold and utterly indifferent to her pain. She didn't notice Marcus lingering at the edge of the clearing, watching her with an expression that held more than disappointment. In the shadows between the trees, the Alpha saw something his pack had missed. The way silver light seemed to gather around her still form, the faint shimmer in the air that spoke of power, yet unnamed. But Aria saw none of it. She saw only the empty path ahead, leading into exile and shame. Chapter 2. The cottage at the territory's edge looked like abandonment given form, weathered wood, broken shutters, and a roof that had seen better decades. Aria dropped her single bag on the sagging porch and tried not to think about the warm bed she'd left behind in the pack house, or the sound of laughter drifting from the communal dining hall where she'd never sit again. 3 days had passed since the ceremony. 3 days of packing her few belongings while her step-family watched with barely concealed relief. Regina hadn't even pretended to be sorry. Maybe this will be good for you, her stepsister Claire had said with false sympathy. You can finally stop embarrassing the family name. Now, surrounded by the silence of the borderlands, Aria wondered if they were right. Maybe she didn't belong anywhere. The cottage's interior was marginally better than its exterior, a single room with basic furniture covered in dust sheets and a stone fireplace that would provide warmth if she could figure out how to work it. No electricity, no running water. This was survival, not living. She was struggling with the manual water pump when she heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy, measured steps that made her heart skip. She knew that walk. Alpha steel filled the doorway, ducking slightly to avoid the low frame. In the small space, his presence was even more overwhelming than usual. He carried a box in his arms and wore an expression she couldn't quite read. Alpha. She dropped into an awkward curtsy, unsure of protocol. Did the usual rules apply when you'd been cast out? I wasn't expecting supplies, he said simply, setting the box on the rickety table. The outer territory is harsh. Even outcasts need to eat. She stared at him, confusion warring with gratitude. Why? For a moment, something raw flickered across his features. Then his alpha mask slipped back into place. Because exile isn't a death sentence. Yet. The yet hung between them like a blade. He moved around the small space with surprising grace for someone his size, checking the fireplace, testing the stability of the furniture. His efficiency was almost clinical, but Aria caught him glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. The pump handle needs oil, he said, crouching beside the stubborn mechanism. There's some in the box. You don't have to. I know what I have to do. The words came out sharper than intended, and he paused in his work. When he looked up at her, his gray eyes held something that might have been an apology. The pack expects me to cast out weakness. But it doesn't mean I have to let you starve while you figure out what you are. What I am is pathetic. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, bitter and raw. A wolf who can't shift. A pack member who brings nothing to the pack. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I should just leave. Marcus stood so quickly she stepped back, her spine hitting the cottage wall. He towered over her, close enough that she could smell his scent, pine and leather, and something wild that made her pulse quicken despite everything. Don't. His voice was low, dangerous. Don't let them make you small. I am small, she whispered. I'm nothing. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. The air between them crackled with possibility. Then he stepped back, the moment shattered. You're more than you know, he said quietly. But you have to discover it yourself. I can't do that for you. He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. There's a full moon in 3 weeks. That's your deadline. And if I still can't shift? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. After he left, Aria sank onto the cottage's single chair and buried her face in her hands. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like a wolf's cry, and somewhere in the distance, she could swear she heard an answering call. From inside the supply box, a leather-bound journal caught her eye. On the first page, written in Marcus's bold handwriting, "For when you're ready to stop running from yourself." That night, alone in the cottage with only firelight for company, Aria opened the journal and began to write. She didn't know what she was looking for, but something told her the answers were already inside her. She just had to be brave enough to find them. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to discover what she was, or lose everything forever. The moon watched through the cottage window, patient and knowing, as if it were waiting for something too. Chapter 3. The Reluctant Alliance begins. 5 days into her exile, Aria had established a routine of sorts. Dawn meant checking the snares she'd clumsily set for rabbits. Midday was for gathering berries and trying to make the hand pump cooperate. Evening brought failed attempts to coax her wolf forward, leaving her frustrated and exhausted. She was returning from the creek with a bucket of water when the scream shattered the forest's peace. High, terrified, and undeniably human, Aria dropped the bucket, water splashing across her boots as she sprinted toward the sound. Her human legs carried her through undergrowth that tore at her clothes and skin, adrenaline overriding rational thought. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed help. The screaming stopped abruptly, which was somehow worse than the sound itself. She burst into a clearing just as a massive gray wolf pinned a young hiker to the ground. The woman, barely more than a teenager, sobbed and thrashed beneath the rogue's weight, her hiking pack scattered across the forest floor. Blood seeped from claw marks on her arm. "Hey!" Aria shouted without thinking. "Get away from her!" The rogue's head snapped up, yellow eyes fixing on her with predatory interest. It was huge, even for a wolf, with patchy fur and scars crisscrossing its muzzle. This wasn't a pack wolf. This was something wild and dangerous that had wandered too close to civilization. The rogue released the hiker and began stalking toward Aria instead, lips peeling back to reveal teeth like white daggers. A low growl rumbled from its chest, promising violence. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs. She had no weapons, no wolf form to defend herself with, nothing but her stubborn refusal to watch someone die. Behind the rogue, the hiker scrambled backwards, whimpering. "That's right," Aria said, backing slowly toward a fallen log. "I'm the bigger threat. Come and get me." The rogue lunged. Aria dove sideways, branches scraping her face as she rolled behind the log. The wolf's claws raked across bark where her head had been a second before. She grabbed a thick branch and swung it like a club, catching the rogue across the shoulder. It yelped but barely staggered. This was it. This was how she died, torn apart by a rogue while trying to save someone she didn't even know. At least it was better than dying of shame. The rogue gathered itself for another attack, muscles bunching beneath matted fur. Aria raised her makeshift weapon and prepared for the end. Then Marcus exploded from the treeline in full wolf form. He was magnificent, all silver-gray power and lethal grace as he slammed into the rogue mid-leap. The two wolves went down in a snarling tangle of teeth and claws, rolling across the forest floor in a blur of violence. Marcus was bigger, stronger, but the rogue fought with the desperate fury of madness. Aria scrambled to the injured hiker. "Can you move? We need to get you out of here." The girl nodded shakily, letting Aria help her to her feet. Together they stumbled toward the treeline as the wolf fight raged behind them. The sounds were terrible. Growls, yelps, the wet snap of jaws finding flesh. Then silence. Aria turned back to see Marcus standing over the rogue's still form, his silver fur stained with blood. Their eyes met across the clearing, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, something that made her chest tight. He padded toward them slowly, head low in a gesture that might have been submission. When he was close enough to touch, he shifted. The transformation was fluid poetry, bones reshaping, muscles flowing like water, for melting away to reveal sun-bronzed skin. Marcus emerged naked and magnificent, blood trickling from scratches across his chest and arms. "Are you hurt?" His gray eyes raked over her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "I'm fine." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "She needs medical attention." Marcus nodded, already moving toward the hiker with practiced efficiency. "Emma Chun, 19, from the university," he said, examining her wounds with gentle hands. "She gets lost hiking up here every few months. Usually her GPS works better than this." "You know her?" "I know everyone who enters our territory." His eyes flicked to Aria. "The question is what you were doing here." Before she could answer, Emma stirred in his arms. "The wolf," she whispered. "There was this huge wolf." "Mountain lion," Marcus said smoothly, his alpha voice carrying undeniable authority. "You're lucky these two were nearby. Head injury can cause hallucinations." Emma blinked slowly, confusion replacing terror. "Mountain lion."
"Right.
"That makes sense." The alpha compulsion washed over her like a gentle wave, rewriting her memories to something her human mind could accept. Aria watched in fascination and horror as the girl's fear transformed into simple gratitude. "We need to get her to the ranger station," Marcus said, lifting Emma as if she weighed nothing. "You're coming with me." "I can't." Aria gestured helplessly toward the deeper forest. "The Exile is temporarily suspended." His tone brooked no argument. "You saved a human life at risk to your own. That deserves consideration." They walked in tense silence through paths only Marcus seemed able to navigate. Emma dozed against his chest, her breathing steady but shallow. Every few minutes, his eyes would find areas, holding her gaze for heartbeats that stretched too long. "Why did you do it?" he asked when they reached the ranger station's parking lot. Aria watched him settle Emma into her car with practiced care, erasing the last of her traumatic memories with gentle touches and whispered commands. The hiker would remember getting lost, maybe falling and hitting her head, but nothing about rogues or wolves or the supernatural world that existed alongside her own. "She was going to die," Aria said simply. "I couldn't just watch. You could have been killed. You had no weapons, no wolf to defend yourself." His voice held an edge of something that might have been fear. "It was reckless." "It was right." Marcus straightened, his full attention focusing on her with laser intensity. "Right doesn't keep you alive. Neither does hiding in exile while people suffer." They stared at each other across the parking lot, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Emma drove away with a cheerful wave, completely oblivious to how close she'd come to becoming a rogue's dinner. "There's a problem," Marcus said finally. "That rogue, it wasn't alone. We've had 3 attacks in the past week, all near the territory borders." Aria's stomach dropped. "More like that one?"
Worse. Organized.
"Someone's driving them toward our lands." His gray eyes held grim certainty. "And they're not stopping until they find what they're looking for." "What are they looking for?" Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his words sent ice through her veins. "The last of the Moonborn bloodline." Chapter 4. Moonborn. The word felt strange on Aria's tongue as they walked back through the forest. "I've never heard of them." "Most haven't." Marcus moved with the easy stride of someone completely at home in the wilderness, but his shoulders held tension that spoke of constant vigilance. The bloodline was thought extinct 50 years ago, hunted to near extinction by those who feared their power. "What kind of power?" He glanced at her sideways. "The kind that changes everything." They were taking a different route back, one that skirted the main packlands but stayed clear of her exile cottage. The path wound through ancient trees whose branches formed a canopy so thick that only scattered moonbeams penetrated to the forest floor. "The rogues aren't random," Marcus continued. "They're being controlled. Sent to test our defenses, probe for weaknesses." "By who?" "Someone who believes a Moonborn still lives in our territory." His voice went hard. Someone willing to sacrifice innocent lives to find them. Aria shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. How can you be sure the bloodline isn't extinct? Marcus stopped walking so abruptly, she almost collided with his back. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable in the dappled moonlight. Because 3 weeks ago, during a failed shifting ceremony, I felt power I haven't sensed since my grandmother's stories. His hand came up to touch her face with devastating gentleness. Ancient power. Sleeping power. Moonborn power. The world tilted beneath her feet. You think I think you're more than anyone realizes, including yourself. Before she could respond, howls erupted from the direction of the pack lands. Not the usual evening song, but the sharp, urgent calls that meant danger. Emergency. All hands to battle stations. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid with alpha instincts. They're attacking the main compound. Go. Aria pushed at his chest, trying to ignore how solid and warm he felt beneath her palms. Your pack needs you. I'm not leaving you alone. Not with rogues in the forest. I'll be fine. Another howl cut through the night, this one higher, more desperate. A cry of pain that made them both flinch. That's David, Marcus said, his face going pale. The beta's youngest son. Aria made the decision without thinking. Take me with you. Absolutely not. You said it yourself, I'm not safe alone. And if I really am what you think I am, maybe I can help. Marcus stared at her for 3 heartbeats, clearly torn between duty and desire to protect her. The howls came again, closer now, and she saw the moment he made his choice. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood. They ran through the forest like shadows given form, Marcus's enhanced senses guiding them along paths invisible to Aria's human eyes. The sounds of battle grew louder, snarls, crashes, the terrible wet sounds of claws meeting flesh. They crested a hill overlooking the pack compound just as chaos erupted in the clearing below. 7 rogues had somehow breached the perimeter. They moved with unnatural coordination, working together in a way that should have been impossible for mad wolves. The pack was fighting back, but they'd been caught off guard. Several wolves were already down, their human forms crumpled on the ground in spreading pools of blood. There. Marcus pointed to a cluster of buildings on the far side of the clearing. That's where they're heading. The archives. What's in the archives? Bloodline records. Family trees going back centuries. His gray eyes found hers. If someone's looking for a Moonborn, that's where they'd find proof. As they watched, 3 rogues broke away from the main fight and raced toward the archive building. The pack members were too busy defending the main compound to stop them. We have to, Aria started to say, but Marcus was already shifting. The change took him in seconds, bones and muscle realigning with practiced ease. His wolf form was even more impressive up close, silver-gray fur that seemed to catch and hold moonlight, amber eyes that burned with intelligence and power. He looked back at her once, a clear message in his gaze, stay safe. Then he was gone, bounding down the hillside toward the battle. Aria watched him crash into the nearest rogue with bone-jarring force, immediately drawing the attention of 2 others. The pack rallied around their alpha, fighting with renewed vigor now that he'd arrived. But the 3 rogues had reached the archives. Through the building's windows, she could see them tearing through shelves, scattering papers like snow. They were going to find the records. They were going to find proof of the Moonborn bloodline, and then Aria didn't let herself finish the thought. Instead, she did something she'd never done before. She stopped thinking and let instinct take over. She ran down the hillside, stumbling over roots and rocks in her haste. Her human form was clumsy compared to the wolves around her, but desperation gave her speed. She had to reach the archives before they found whatever they were looking for. The building's back door hung open, torn from its hinges by rogue claws. Aria slipped inside to find chaos. Overturned shelves, scattered documents, 3 massive wolves systematically destroying centuries of pack history. One of them spotted her and snarled, yellow eyes gleaming with murderous intent. It started toward her, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Stop." The word came out of her mouth without conscious thought, but it carried weight that made the rogue pause mid-stride. Aria stepped forward, and something incredible happened. Silver light began to emanate from her skin, soft at first, but growing brighter with each heartbeat. The light seemed to have substance, pressing against the walls and ceiling like liquid moonlight given form. The rogues whined and backed away, their aggression melting into something that looked almost like reverence. "You will leave this place," Aria heard herself saying, though her voice sounded strange, older, more authoritative. "You will return to whoever sent you and tell them the Moonborn sleeps no longer." The largest rogue, the one who'd been stalking toward her, dropped to its belly in submission. The other two followed suit, whimpering like scolded puppies. "Go," Aria commanded, and the silver light pulsed brighter. "Now." The rogues fled through the broken door as if their tails were on fire. Outside, the sounds of battle began to fade as the remaining attackers followed their packmates in retreat. Aria stood alone in the destroyed archive, silver light slowly fading from her skin like dying embers. The silence felt deafening after the chaos. She looked down at her hands, still glowing faintly in the darkness, and whispered the words that would change everything. "What am I?" From the doorway came Marcus's voice, rough with awe and something deeper. "You're the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was making." She turned to find him back in human form, naked and bloody, but very much alive. His gray eyes held wonder and desire and a recognition that made her heart race. "The Moonborn," he continued, stepping into the silver-touched space around her. "The bloodline that can command any wolf. The power that could unite all packs under one banner. Or tear them apart," Aria whispered, finally understanding why the Moonborn had been hunted to extinction. "Power like this, it's dangerous." "Yes." Marcus reached for her hands, his fingers intertwining with hers as the last of the silver light faded. But in the right hands, it could save us all. Outside, the pack was regrouping, tending to their wounded and securing their territory. But in the archive's intimate darkness, Alpha and Outcast stood on the threshold of something that would reshape their world. The question was whether they were brave enough to step across it. Chapter 5. The pack council chamber buzzed with tension thick enough to cut. 12 of the most powerful wolves in the Crescent Moon pack sat around a circular table carved from ancient oak, their eyes fixed on Aria like she was a bomb that might explode at any moment. Which, she supposed, wasn't far from the truth. The Moonborn bloodline was eliminated for good reason. Elder Thompson's voice cracked with age and certainty. Their power corrupts. It turns wolves against their own nature. "With respect, Elder," Marcus said from his position at the head of the table, "what we witnessed last night suggests control, not corruption." She commanded rogues to retreat without violence. This time, Beta Williams interjected, his scarred face grim. "What happens when she decides she doesn't like our decisions? When she commands us to kneel?" Aria shifted uncomfortably in her chair, hyper-aware of every gaze tracking her movement. 3 hours ago, she'd been an exiled outcast scraping by in a broken-down cottage. Now she sat in the most sacred space in pack territory, listening to wolves debate whether she was their salvation or their doom. "I would never," she started to say. "You say that now," Melissa Carver interrupted, her voice sharp with the same disdain she'd shown at the ceremony. "But power changes people. My grandmother told stories about the last Moonborn, how she started benevolent and ended up enslaving 3 packs before the rebellion brought her down." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Aria's hands clenched in her lap as something stirred beneath her skin, not the silver light from before, but something deeper, wilder. The sensation of a caged animal pacing behind her ribs. "That's enough." Marcus's alpha voice carried absolute authority, silencing the room instantly. "Aria saved lives last night, both human and pack. She's earned the right to speak for herself." All eyes turned to her, expectant and wary. Aria took a shaky breath and forced herself to meet each gaze in turn. "I don't know what I am," she said quietly. 3 days ago, I couldn't shift. Last night, I made rogues bow with a word. I'm as scared as you are. Fear isn't enough, Elder Thompson said. The question is what you'll do with abilities that could reshape our world. Before Aria could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A young pack member stumbled inside, his face pale with terror. Alpha, he gasped. The southern border. Something's wrong with the patrol. Marcus was on his feet instantly. Define wrong. They're not responding to MindLink. We found their abandoned posts, but no scent trails, no signs of struggle. It's like they just vanished. The council erupted in worried murmurs. The southern border backed up against neutral territory, where several smaller packs maintained uneasy truces. If something had happened to their patrol, could be rogues, Beta Williams suggested. More organized attacks. Or worse, Elder Thompson muttered. If word has spread about the Moonborn awakening. Marcus's gray eyes found Aria's across the table. She saw the moment he made his decision, and her stomach clenched with dread. I'm taking a team to investigate, he announced. Aria, you're with me. The council exploded in protests, but Marcus raised a hand for silence. If this is connected to her bloodline, she may be the only one who can handle it. And if it's a trap, he looked directly at Aria. We'll face it together. An hour later, Aria found herself racing through the forest in the passenger seat of Marcus's Jeep, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind them, 2 vehicles carried 8 of the pack's best fighters, Beta Williams, his son David, and 6 others whose reputations for lethal efficiency preceded them. Tell me about shifting, Marcus said suddenly, his hands steady on the steering wheel despite their breakneck pace through winding mountain roads. What about it? You've never completed a transformation. But last night, your power manifested without it. That shouldn't be possible. Aria stared out the window at blurred trees. Maybe I'm broken in more ways than one. Or maybe you're different for a reason. His voice held conviction she wished she felt. The old stories say Moonborn don't shift the same way other wolves do. Their power comes from the moon itself, not from their wolf spirit. What does that mean? Marcus was quiet for several heartbeats. I think it means you've been trying to force a change that was never meant for you. Your wolf isn't separate from your human side. It's woven through everything you are. Before she could process that revelation, the Jeep crested a hill and revealed the southern border checkpoint. Aria's breath caught in her throat. The patrol station was intact, but wrong. Equipment sat exactly where it should be, coffee still steaming in abandoned cups, but the air itself felt empty.
Hollow.
Like something vital had been sucked out of the space. Marcus killed the engine and stepped out, his senses immediately on high alert. The rest of the team flanked them, weapons drawn, every wolf tense with the awareness of unseen danger. There, David pointed to a copse of trees 50 yards from the station. Movement. They approached in formation, Marcus leading with Aria close behind him. Her skin began to prickle with the same sensation she'd felt in the archives, power stirring, responding to threat. They found the missing patrol in a clearing that shouldn't have existed. 5 pack members stood in perfect formation around a stone altar that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. Their eyes were open but vacant, staring at nothing with expressions of blissful emptiness. Jake, Beta Williams called to his nephew. Jake, can you hear me? The young wolf didn't respond. None of them did. They stood like beautiful statues, breathing but not alive. Enthrallment, Marcus breathed. Someone's taken their minds. Who has that kind of power? David asked, his weapon trained on the motionless patrol members. Aria stepped forward, drawn by an instinct she didn't understand. The altar drew her attention, black stone carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. But it wasn't the carvings that made her blood run cold. It was the fresh blood pooling in the center, still warm and gleaming red. It's a summoning circle, she whispered, understanding flooding through her like ice water. Someone's trying to call something through. Call what? Before she could answer, the blood began to glow. The carved symbols pulsed with malevolent light as something stirred in the space above the altar. Reality rippled like water, and a voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. The Moonborn awakens at last. How delicious. The enthralled patrol members turned as one to face Aria, their empty eyes now burning with alien intelligence. Behind her, she heard weapons cock and safety protocols engage. I have waited so long to meet the last of your bloodline, little wolf. Your ancestors were such exquisite challenges before we broke them. Aria's power surged in response to the threat, silver light beginning to bleed from her skin. But this was different from before, wilder, harder to control. The thing speaking through her packmates was old and hungry and utterly without mercy. What do you want? She called out, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. What I have always wanted. To feast on power that could reshape the world. Your bloodline's gift will sustain me for centuries. The possessed patrol members began walking toward her in perfect synchronization. Marcus stepped protectively in front of her, but she could see the calculation in his eyes. Fighting their own people, even possessed ones, went against every instinct. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Oh, there is. Submit willingly, and I will release them unharmed. Fight, and watch your precious pack tear itself apart. Aria felt the weight of 8 lives pressing down on her shoulders. Marcus would die before letting her sacrifice herself. The possessed patrol members would be used as weapons against their own families. There was no winning this fight. Unless... I have a counteroffer, she said, stepping out from behind Marcus despite his growled protest. You intrigue me, little Moonborn. Speak. Trial by combat. Ancient law. You pick a champion, I pick mine. Winner takes all. The presence paused, considering. And if I win? You get me and my power willingly. No resistance. And if you somehow manage victory, you release the patrol and leave our territory forever. Malicious laughter echoed from 5 throats at once. Agreed. I choose. The possessed patrol members parted, revealing a figure emerging from shadow behind the altar. Aria's heart stopped. It was Marcus or something wearing his face. But this version moved wrong, its gray eyes holding depths of cruelty the Exile Alpha would never possess. I choose the one whose heart you would never break. Fight your mate, little Moonborn. Let's see what love is truly worth. Chapter 6.
No.
Marcus's voice was granite and steel as he stared at his doppelganger. I won't let you use my form to hurt her. The false Marcus smiled with teeth that gleamed too sharp in the unnatural light. The choice isn't yours, Alpha. Ancient law binds us all. Aria's mind raced as she watched the 2 versions of Marcus size each other up. The possessed one moved like a predator wearing familiar skin, all wrong angles and predatory grace. But she could see the trap now. Whatever entity controlled this place had studied them, learned their weaknesses. It knew she'd never be able to fight something wearing Marcus's face. There's a flaw in your logic, she said, stepping forward despite every instinct screaming at her to run. You said I could choose my champion. Indeed. And you choose... myself. The words rang across the clearing with finality. Marcus whipped around to stare at her, his gray eyes wide with shock and something that might have been pride. Aria, no, he said quietly. You don't know how to fight. Not like this. I know. She touched his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath her palm. But I also know something else. I've been trying to be what everyone else expected instead of what I actually am. She stepped into the center of the clearing, facing the false Marcus across 10 feet of blood-soaked ground. The entity inhabiting his form smiled with cruel anticipation. How refreshing. The lamb walks willingly to slaughter. Maybe, Aria said, closing her eyes and reaching deep inside herself. Or maybe the wolf finally stops pretending to be human. This time, when she called to the power sleeping in her bones, she didn't try to control it. Didn't try to shape it into something manageable or safe. She simply let go. Silver light erupted from her skin like liquid starfire. But this wasn't the gentle glow from the archives. This was pure moonlight given form, wild and primal and utterly untamed. It poured from her in waves, washing over the clearing until everything gleamed like molten silver. And in that light, something incredible happened. Her bones began to shift. Not the painful, Forced change she'd attempted 1,000 times before. This was transformation as it was meant to be, fluid, natural, inevitable as sunrise. Her human form flowed like water, reshaping itself into something magnificent. She didn't become a wolf. She became something far more ancient, far more dangerous. Her shifted form was larger than any normal wolf, built like liquid mercury and starlight. Her fur shimmered between silver and white, and her eyes burned with the pale fire of the full moon. But it was more than physical change. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, pressing against reality itself. The possessed Marcus took an involuntary step backward, its confident smile faltering. Impossible. The Moonborn were wolves like any other. No. Aria's voice came from everywhere at once, harmonized with the song of lunar tides. We were never wolves. We were the moon's children, given flesh and form to walk among mortals. She moved and reality bent around her. One moment she was across the clearing, the next she had the false Marcus by the throat, her claws resting against skin that felt wrong. Too cold, too smooth. You made one mistake, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. You try to make me fight something I love. But love isn't weakness. Silver fire poured from her claws into the possessed form. The entity shrieked as its hold began to dissolve under the onslaught of pure lunar power. Love is what makes us strong enough to do what's necessary. The false Marcus writhed in her grip, its features blurring as the entity lost cohesion. You cannot destroy me. I am eternal. I am gone. Aria finished and closed her claws. The entity's scream cut off abruptly. The possessed form crumbled to ash between her fingers, carried away on wind that tasted of moonlight and freedom. Across the clearing, the enthralled patrol members collapsed like marionettes with cut strings. They groaned and stirred, consciousness returning as the entity's hold shattered. Aria stood in the center of it all, still wreathed in silver fire, still magnificent and terrible and beautiful beyond words. She turned to look at Marcus, and for a moment he saw something in her luminous eyes that made his breath catch. Not the sweet, uncertain girl who'd knelt in shame at the ceremony. This was the Luna she was meant to become, powerful, confident, utterly in command of forces that could reshape the world. It's over, she said, and the silver light began to fade. Her form flowed back to human, leaving her naked and shivering in the aftermath of transformation. Marcus was moving before conscious thought kicked in, shrugging out of his jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. His hands lingered on her arms, steadying her as reaction set in. That was incredible, he said quietly, his voice rough with awe. You are incredible. She looked up at him, and he saw the moment her confidence wavered. I lost control. I could have hurt someone. I could have. You saved them. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. You saved all of us. The space between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with supernatural power. This was pure, undeniable attraction, the magnetic pull between Alpha and Luna, between two souls recognizing their perfect match. Marcus, she whispered, and he heard everything she couldn't say in his name. He was leaning down, drawn by gravity and desire, and the absolute certainty that kissing her would change everything, when Beta Williams cleared his throat loudly. Alpha? We should probably get the patrol back to base. They're going to need medical attention. The moment shattered, but not completely. As they helped the recovering patrol members to their feet and began the journey home, Marcus found excuses to touch her, a steadying hand at her elbow, fingers brushing hers as he handed her a water bottle, his jacket settling more securely around her shoulders. Each touch sent electricity racing through her veins. Each glance held promises of conversations yet to come. What happens now? Aria asked as they loaded the rescued patrol members into the vehicles. Marcus looked at her across the Jeep's roof, his gray eyes holding depths she was only beginning to understand. Now you learn what it means to be who you really are. And what am I? His smile was slow and devastating, full of heat that made her toes curl in her borrowed boots. "You're mine," he said simply. "If you'll have me." The drive back to pack territory had never felt longer, or more full of possibility. In the rearview mirror, the summoning sight was already returning to normal forest, the altar crumbling to dust as natural order reasserted itself. But in the Jeep's intimate space, surrounded by Marcus's scent and the memory of silver fire, Aria felt the first stirrings of something she'd never dared hope for. She felt like she belonged. The question was whether she was brave enough to claim it. Chapter 7. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after Aria's transformation at the southern border. She woke to the sound of emergency howls echoing across pack territory, not the organized calls of a planned hunt, but the ragged, desperate cries of wolves fighting for their lives. Through her cottage window, she could see smoke rising from the direction of the main compound. Aria was dressed and running before her mind fully processed the danger. Her bare feet flew over forest paths that were becoming as familiar as breathing, her enhanced senses picking up scents of blood, fear, and something else, something wrong that made her newly awakened wolf recoil in instinctive terror. She crested the hill overlooking pack territory to find chaos. Creatures that looked like wolves but moved all wrong swarmed through the compound. They were too large, too fast, with eyes that burned like embers and claws that gleamed metallic in the morning light. Shadow wolves, abominations created by dark magic, neither alive nor truly dead. The pack was fighting valiantly, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Aria watched Marcus in his magnificent wolf form tear through 2 attackers, only to have 4 more take their place. Beta Williams coordinated the defense from the central courtyard while his fighters formed protective circles around the non-combatants. But it wasn't enough. They were losing. "The children," she breathed, spotting a group of young ones huddled in the schoolhouse while shadow wolves circled like vultures. "They're going for the children." Without conscious thought, Aria called her power. Silver light erupted from her skin as she shifted into her moonborn form, larger than any natural wolf, wreathed in lunar fire that turned the dawn light pale by comparison. She launched herself down the hillside like a falling star. The first shadow wolf never saw her coming. Her claws, burning with moonfire, tore through its unnatural flesh like tissue paper. It dissolved with a shriek that sounded like tearing metal. "The Luna!" someone shouted from the courtyard. "The Luna has come." The pack's battle cry went up, hope rekindling as their fighters saw reinforcement arriving. But Aria barely heard them. Her entire focus was on the schoolhouse, where 6 shadow wolves were trying to break through the barricaded doors while terrified whimpers echoed from inside. She hit the pack of attackers like a silver thunderbolt. Her power flowed through her claws, each strike burning away the dark magic that animated the creatures. But for every one she destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Behind you." Marcus's mental voice crashed into her consciousness just as she spun to face a shadow wolf lunging for her exposed flank. She ducked, rolled, came up slashing, but the creature's claws raked across her shoulder, leaving burning lines of pain. Shadow wolf toxin. She could feel it trying to spread through her system, seeking to corrupt her power from within. "Not today," she snarled, calling on the purifying fire of the moon itself. Silver flames raced along her wounds, burning away the toxin before it could take hold. The shadow wolf that had marked her reeled back, its ember eyes wide with something that might have been fear. "You cannot corrupt moonlight," Aria said, her voice carrying across the battlefield with supernatural resonance. "And you cannot break what was forged in celestial fire." She raised her head and howled, not the cry of a normal wolf, but something older, more primal. The song of the moon itself, calling its children home. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every shadow wolf on the battlefield froze as the sound washed over them, their unnatural forms beginning to smoke and dissolve. The dark magic animating them couldn't withstand the purity of lunar song. But the effort left Aria drained, silver light flickering like a dying candle. She swayed on her feet, the moonborn form becoming harder to maintain. That's when she saw him. The figure stepped out of the forest at the compound's edge, and Aria's blood turned to ice. Tall, elegant, with silver hair that gleamed like metal and eyes the color of winter frost. He moved with the fluid grace of apex predation, power radiating from him in waves that made reality shimmer. Impressive little Moonborn, his voice carried across the now silent battlefield. But predictable. You always were too soft-hearted for your own good. Who are you? Aria demanded, though some ancestral part of her already knew. His smile was sharp as broken glass. I am Breathless the Hunter, your family's oldest enemy, and I've come to collect what your bloodline stole from me 3 centuries ago. The remaining shadow wolves were formed around him, their numbers somehow doubled. But worse, Aria could feel his power pressing against her mind, not the crude enthrallment she'd faced before, but something far more sophisticated. Something designed specifically to counter Moonborn abilities. The power of the moon was never meant for mortal flesh, Breathless continued, beginning to circle her like a predator toying with wounded prey. It belongs to those with the strength to wield it properly. Your ancestors were thieves. I'm simply reclaiming stolen property. Marcus moved to stand beside her, his wolf form bristling with protective fury. Around the compound, the pack formed ranks, ready to fight and die for their Luna. But Aria could see the truth in Breathless's pale eyes. He wasn't here for a fair fight. He was here for total destruction, her power, her pack, everything she'd come to love. Last chance, little wolf, the hunter said softly. Surrender your power willingly, and I'll make their deaths quick. Aria looked around at the faces of her pack, wolves who'd once mocked her, now willing to die defending her. Marcus beside her, solid and steady as granite. The schoolhouse where children huddled, counting on her to keep them safe. I have a counteroffer, she said, silver light beginning to build around her once more. Go to hell. Breathless laughed, the sound like ice cracking. I was hoping you'd say that. The battle erupted with hurricane force. Shadow wolves crashed against the pack's defensive lines while Breathless himself came for Aria, moving faster than thought. His power was vast, ancient, refined by centuries of use. But Aria had something he didn't expect. She had love worth fighting for. Chapter 8. Pack rivals plot against her. The battle with Breathless raged for what felt like hours, but could only have been minutes. Aria's silver fire clashed against his winter-cold power in explosions that shattered windows and scorched the earth. Around them, the pack fought desperately to hold back his shadow wolves, but their strength was failing. Marcus never left her side, harrying Breathless whenever the ancient enemy tried to press an advantage. But even he couldn't match something that had been perfecting the art of killing for centuries. Aria felt her power beginning to wane. The Moonborn transformation was still new to her, untrained, and maintaining it under combat stress was like trying to hold back an avalanche with bare hands. This is how it ends, she thought as Breathless's latest attack sent her skidding across the compound's courtyard. Not with triumph, but with failure. That's when she heard the voice. Enough. It cut across the battlefield like a blade, stopping every fighter in their tracks. Aria looked up to see Elder Thompson striding into the courtyard, but this wasn't the frail old man who'd questioned her in council. This was something far older, power radiating from his ancient frame like heat from a furnace. Breathless, the elder said calmly. Still breaking your exile, I see. The hunter's pale eyes narrowed. Thompson, I should have known you'd still be here, playing guardian to unworthy children. The Moonborn bloodline isn't yours to claim, Thompson replied. It never was. The moon chooses its own children. Breathless snarled, his civilized mask finally slipping. I earned that power. I sacrificed everything for it. You murdered for it, Thompson corrected. There's a difference. Understanding crashed over Aria like a cold wave. Breathless wasn't some ancient enemy of her bloodline. He was part of it. A Moonborn who'd tried to steal power meant for others, who'd been cast out for his crimes. Family reunion? She gasped, struggling to her feet. Something like that, Thompson said grimly. Breathless was the last Moonborn before you. He's the reason the bloodline was thought extinct. The hunter laughed bitterly. They cast me out for doing what was necessary. for taking the power meant for weaklings and putting it to proper use. You tried to drain the moon itself, Thompson snapped. You would have destroyed the balance between all supernatural forces. And I would have succeeded, if not for bleeding heart fools who couldn't see the bigger picture. Aria felt something click into place, the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving. That's what this is about, she said, silver light beginning to build around her once more. You think if you kill me and take my power, you can finish what you started. Valdris's smile was pure malevolence. The last Moonborn, with abilities that haven't been contaminated by centuries of hiding. Yes, little niece. You're exactly what I need. The word niece hit like a physical blow, but Aria forced herself to stay focused. Family or not, Valdris represented everything she refused to become. Power without conscience, strength without compassion. There's just one problem with your plan, she said, rising to her full Moonborn height. And what's that? You're not taking my power. Silver fire erupted around her, brighter than before, fed by righteous fury and the absolute need to protect her pack. I'm giving it away. Before anyone could stop her, Aria reached out with her consciousness and touched every pack member on the battlefield. Not to command or control, but to share. The silver light flowed from her into them, not draining her power but multiplying it. Marcus's wolf form began to glow with moonfire. Beta Williams's claws elongated into silver blades. Every fighter on the field suddenly moved with enhanced speed, strength, and the protective blessing of lunar power. Impossible, Valdris breathed. The power must be contained, controlled. The power wants to be shared, Aria said, understanding flooding through her like dawn breaking. That's what it's for. Not to make one person into a god, but to make everyone stronger. The pack attacked as one, 40 wolves moving with supernatural coordination. Valdris's shadow creatures dissolved under their moon-blessed claws, unable to maintain cohesion against so much purified power. But the ancient Moonborn wasn't finished. With a roar of fury, he began pulling power from somewhere else, somewhere dark and cold that made reality scream in protest. If I can't have it, he snarled, his form beginning to expand into something monstrous, then no one can. The explosion of dark energy sent everyone flying. When the smoke cleared, Valdris stood at the center of a crater of blasted earth, no longer anything resembling human. He'd become a creature of living shadow, fed by stolen power and ancient rage. Now you face what I truly am, his voice echoed from everywhere at once. The void between stars. The hunger that devours light. Aria struggled to her feet, her silver light dim and flickering. She'd given too much to the pack, left herself vulnerable. Around her, the other wolves were stirring, but slowly. This final confrontation would be hers alone. Marcus, she called without turning around. If this goes badly. It won't, he said firmly, though she could hear the fear in his mental voice. You're stronger than he is. I'm not, she admitted. But I don't have to be. She closed her eyes and reached out one last time, not to her pack, but to something infinitely larger. The moon itself, hanging invisible in the morning sky. The source of all Moonborn power, patient and eternal and utterly untouchable by creatures of shadow. Help me, she whispered to the lunar consciousness that had guided her bloodline for millennia. Help me save them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flowed through her, not her own limited strength, but the limitless energy of celestial fire. She became a conduit for moonlight itself, her form blazing like a second sun. No, Valdris screamed, his shadow form beginning to burn away. This isn't how it ends. Yes, Aria said, her voice harmonizing with lunar song. It is. The blast of pure moonlight incinerated Valdris's stolen form in seconds, leaving nothing but scattered ash that the wind carried away. The shadow wolves dissolved like smoke, their anchor to reality severed. In the sudden silence, Aria collapsed to her knees, the moon's power withdrawing to leave her merely human once more. But she was smiling because she could hear something beautiful, the sound of children laughing in the schoolhouse, safe and whole. Marcus was beside her in seconds, gathering her into his arms with desperate tenderness. "Is it over?" she whispered against his chest. "It's over," he confirmed, his voice rough with relief. "You saved us all." Around them, the pack began to cheer, not the polite acknowledgement of duty done, but the genuine celebration of a Luna who'd proven herself beyond any doubt. But even as Aria let herself sag against Marcus's solid warmth, she caught sight of Melissa Carver watching from the crowd. The Beta's daughter's expression held something that made Aria's victory feel suddenly fragile. Jealousy. Calculation. The look of someone who just realized her own ambitions had been permanently blocked. The external threat was gone, but Aria sensed the real test was just beginning. Chapter 9. The Luna ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon 3 days away. Aria should have been celebrating, but instead she found herself pacing the length of her cottage at midnight, anxiety eating at her insides like acid. Everything had changed since the battle with Valdris. The pack looked at her with reverence now instead of scorn, stepping aside when she walked by, seeking her opinion on matters that had nothing to do with supernatural threats. Children who'd once hidden behind their mothers now ran up to her with bright smiles, wanting to touch the hands that had saved them. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like drowning in expectations she wasn't sure she could meet. A soft knock on her door interrupted her brooding. She opened it to find Marcus standing on her porch, 2 steaming mugs in his hands and concern written across his handsome features. "Thought you might need company," he said, offering her one of the mugs. The scent of chamomile and honey wrapped around her like a warm embrace. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. Hard to sleep when your mate is broadcasting anxiety loud enough to wake the dead. His gray eyes held gentle teasing. "Pack bonds work both ways, Aria. I can feel your distress." The casual use of mate made her pulse skip, but she forced herself to focus on the larger issue. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess up the ceremony? Or worse, what if I'm not the Luna they need? Marcus set his mug on the rickety table and turned to face her fully. "Tell me what's really bothering you." Aria wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, using it to anchor herself. "Melissa came to see me today." Marcus's expression darkened. "What did she say?" "That I was deluding myself if I thought saving the pack once made me leadership material. That Luna ceremonies require more than raw power. They require wisdom, experience, the kind of deep pack knowledge I'll never have." The words tumbled out like poison she'd been holding back. She said the pack was just grateful now, but gratitude fades. When they need real guidance, real leadership, they'll realize their mistake. And you believed her. It wasn't a question. Marcus moved closer, his presence filling the small space with warmth and the comforting scent of pine and leather. "She's not wrong," Aria whispered. "I was an outcast 3 weeks ago. I don't know pack law, pack traditions. I can barely control my own power, let alone guide others." "You saved 43 lives," Marcus said quietly. "You faced down a creature that had been perfecting the art of killing for centuries. You shared your power instead of hoarding it, proving you understand what leadership really means. That was instinct, desperation. That was love." His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "You didn't save us because you had to, Aria. You saved us because you couldn't bear to see us hurt. That's what makes a Luna." Before she could respond, another knock echoed through the cottage. Harder, more urgent. Marcus frowned and moved to the door, his body language shifting into protective mode. Elder Thompson stood on the porch, but something was wrong. The ancient wolf's face was pale, his hands trembling with what might have been fear. "Alpha. Luna." He nodded to both of them, but his eyes stayed fixed on Aria. "We have a problem." They gathered in the pack's sacred grove an hour later. Aria, Marcus, Thompson, and Beta Williams. The moonlight filtered through ancient oak branches, casting everything in silver and shadow. "Show her," Thompson said grimly. Beta Williams stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in black silk. When he unfolded it, Aria's breath caught in her throat. A crystal the size of her fist lay in the fabric, but it was wrong. Instead of clear transparency, it pulsed with sick purple light. Veins of corruption spread through its surface like infection through flesh. The heart of the pack, Thompson explained. It's been hidden in the archives for 3 centuries, ever since the last Luna ceremony. It holds the spiritual essence of every pack member, past and present. Aria stared at the corrupted crystal, dread building in her chest. What's wrong with it? Valdris, Marcus said grimly. When he drew on stolen power during the battle, he contaminated our spiritual core. The corruption is spreading. How long do we have? She asked, though she already dreaded the answer. 3 days, Thompson said. If it's not cleansed by the full moon, the pack bond will shatter permanently. We'll become rogues. All of us. Mad. Isolated. Eventually dying alone. The weight of 43 lives settled on Aria's shoulders like a physical burden. What do I need to do? Thompson and Beta Williams exchanged glances that made her stomach clench with apprehension. The heart can only be cleansed by a true Luna, Thompson said carefully. But the process, it's dangerous. You'll have to enter the crystal itself, face whatever corruption Valdris left behind, and burn it out with your power. The last Luna who attempted it died, Beta Williams added bluntly. The corruption consumed her from within. How encouraging, Aria muttered, but she was already reaching for the crystal. When do we start? Aria, no. Marcus caught her wrist before she could touch the infected stone. There has to be another way. There isn't, Thompson said quietly. I've spent the last day searching through every text, every ritual. This is the only path. Then I'll go with her, Marcus said firmly. You can't. The heart only admits one consciousness at a time. She'll be completely alone in there. Alone. The word echoed in Aria's mind like a death knell. She'd face whatever poison Valdris had left behind with no backup, no support, nothing but her own untested power. I'll do it, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Marcus spun to face her, his gray eyes blazing with desperate intensity. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. The pack will understand. The pack will die. She met his gaze steadily, drawing strength from the love she saw there. I won't let that happen. Not when I can prevent it. What if you don't come back? The question hung in the air like smoke, heavy with all the words they hadn't said yet. All the promises they hadn't made. Aria reached up to touch his face, memorizing the feel of his skin beneath her palm. Then you'll know I died doing something that mattered. That's not good enough, he said roughly. I need you to come back to me. I'll try, she whispered. I promise I'll try. They prepared the ritual in silence, each lost in their own fears. Thompson drew protective circles in the grove's sacred earth, while Beta Williams arranged crystals at cardinal points. Marcus stood guard, his tension so thick it was almost visible. As midnight approached, Aria knelt in the center of the circle, with the corrupted heart cradled in her palms. The sick purple light pulsed against her skin like a diseased heartbeat. Remember, Thompson said, his voice formal with ritual gravity. Once you enter the heart, you'll be in a realm shaped by the pack's collective unconscious. The corruption will try to break you, convince you to surrender. It will show you your deepest fears, your greatest shames. And if I give in, then we all die together. Aria closed her eyes and opened her consciousness to the crystal's pull. The world dissolved around her like smoke, replaced by something far stranger and more dangerous. She was standing in a vast library that stretched beyond sight in all directions, its shelves filled with glowing books that she somehow knew contained every memory, every experience, every dream the pack had ever shared. But half the books were burning with purple fire, their pages crumbling to ash. And watching her from the library's heart stood a figure that made her blood turn to ice. It was herself, or rather, a twisted reflection of what she might become. This other Aria wore a crown of black thorns, her eyes burning with the same purple corruption that infected the crystal. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge, but it was wrong, selfish, demanding, utterly without compassion. Finally, the corrupted Luna said with a smile like broken glass, I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve. You're what Valdris left behind, Aria said, calling silver light to her hands. His final trap. I'm what you could become, the Shadow Luna corrected. What you will become, once you realize the truth. What truth? That power is wasted on those too weak to use it properly. The corrupted version began to circle her like a predator. Look around you. All this knowledge, all these memories, they belong to wolves who couldn't protect themselves, who needed you to save them because they were too pathetic to save themselves. They're not pathetic, Aria said firmly. They're family. Family? The Shadow Luna laughed, the sound like breaking bells. They cast you out.
Mocked you.
Made you live in exile while they enjoyed the comfort of the pack house. And now, when they need your power, suddenly you're family again. Despite herself, Aria felt doubt creeping in. The memories were there. Every sneer, every whispered insult, every moment of crushing loneliness. They were afraid, she said, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. They were cruel. And you know what the beautiful part is? The Shadow Luna moved closer, her corrupted power pressing against Aria's defenses. Deep down, you enjoyed watching them suffer. When Valdris attacked, when they were screaming and bleeding and dying, there was a part of you that thought they deserved it. The accusation hit like a physical blow because there was truth in it. For just a moment during the battle, she had felt a savage satisfaction watching her tormentors face real danger. That's normal, she whispered. That's human. That's weak. Purple fire erupted around the Shadow Luna, burning away the pretense of humanity to reveal something monstrous beneath. I am what you become when you stop pretending weakness is virtue. When you take the power that's rightfully yours and use it to reshape the world. The corrupted version of herself was magnificent and terrible. Everything Aria had ever wanted to be, freed from doubt and compassion and the messy complications of caring about others. Join with me, the Shadow Luna purred. Let me burn away the parts of you that hesitate, that doubt, that cling to creatures too weak to deserve your protection. Together, we can be what the world needs, a Luna with the strength to rule properly. For a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, Aria was tempted. The power called to her, promising an end to uncertainty, to the constant fear that she wasn't enough. Then she thought of Marcus's hands on her face, gentle and certain. Of children laughing in a schoolhouse she'd kept safe. Of a pack that had welcomed her home despite all their fears. No, she said quietly. That's not strength. That's just another kind of weakness. The Shadow Luna's expression twisted with rage. You fool. You could have everything. I already do. Aria raised her hands, silver light blazing between her fingers. I have love worth protecting. That's more than enough. The battle for the heart of the pack began in earnest, light clashing against darkness in a library filled with the dreams of wolves.
Chapter 10.
The fight raged through the infinite library, silver moonfire clashing against corrupted purple flame. Books burned and reformed around them as the pack's collective unconscious tried to process two opposing versions of its Luna. Aria's shadow self was everything she might have become if she'd chosen power over compassion, magnificent, terrible, and utterly without mercy. Every strike came with whispered temptations, promises of strength without weakness, authority without doubt. Look how they cower from you now, the corrupted Luna hissed, as she sent a wave of purple fire toward a section of children's dreams. Deep down, they know you're their superior. Why pretend otherwise? Aria threw herself between the attack and the vulnerable memories, her silver light absorbing the corruption before it could spread. The effort left her gasping, power flickering like a dying candle. Because that's not what strength is, she panted, struggling to maintain her defenses. Then what is? The Shadow Luna pressed her advantage, darkness closing in from all sides. Sacrificing yourself for ungrateful creatures who would abandon you the moment you showed weakness? For a moment, doubt crept in again. Was she being noble, or just naive? The pack had cast her out once. What guarantee did she have that they wouldn't do it again if she survived this? Then, through the crystal's connection to the pack bonds, she felt them. Marcus's desperate love, burning like a beacon in the darkness. Beta Williams's gruff respect, earned through trial by fire. Elder Thompson's ancient wisdom, patient and sure. Even Melissa Carver's grudging acknowledgement that Aria had proven herself beyond doubt. And beneath it all, the warm glow of 40 other souls linked to hers through bonds deeper than blood. Imperfect, sometimes cruel, but ultimately family in the truest sense. That's what strength is, Aria said, understanding flooding through her like dawn breaking. Not ruling over others, but standing with them. Not demanding worship, but earning trust. She reached out through the pack bonds, not to command but to request. "Help me," she whispered to the sleeping consciousness of her wolves. "Lend me your strength." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flowed into her, not just her own moonfire, but the collective strength of every pack member. The librarian's careful attention to detail, the warrior's unflinching courage, the mother's fierce protection, the child's boundless hope. She wasn't just Aria anymore. She was Luna, the living embodiment of everything her pack could be at their best. Impossible, the shadow Luna breathed, her corrupted form beginning to waver as pure pack bonds overwhelmed Valdris's poison. Not impossible, Aria corrected, silver light blazing around her like a second sun. Just something you'll never understand. Power shared is power multiplied. The final confrontation was brief, but decisive. Moonfire, strengthened by love and trust and the unbreakable bonds of family, incinerated the corruption in seconds. The Shadow Luna's scream cut off abruptly as she dissolved into nothingness, taking Valdris's final trap with her. In the sudden silence, Aria found herself alone in a library restored to pristine beauty. The books glowed with healthy golden light, their pages filled with memories cleansed of poison. At the library's heart, a new book was writing itself, the story of a Luna who chose love over power, trust over dominance. The crystal released her with a sensation like surfacing from deep water. She gasped, her consciousness snapping back to her physical body in the sacred grove. Dawn light filtered through the oak branches, painting everything in soft gold. Aria. Marcus was beside her instantly, gathering her into his arms as if he'd never let her go. "Thank the goddess," I thought, when the crystal went dark. "It's done," she said, leaning into his solid warmth. "The corruption is gone." She looked down at the heart of the pack in her hands. The sick purple light had vanished, replaced by pure crystal clarity that reflected the dawn like captured starlight. "The pack bonds?" Elder Thompson asked urgently. Aria reached out with her consciousness and smiled at what she found. 43 bright flames burning steady and strong, all connected through threads of silver light that pulsed with healthy energy. "Stronger than ever," she reported. Beta Williams let out a shaky breath. "The Luna ceremony?" "Will proceed as planned," Marcus said firmly, his gray eyes never leaving Aria's face. "If our Luna is willing." The formal question hung in the air between them, heavy with significance. This was the moment of choice: accept the crown and all its responsibilities, or walk away while she still could. Aria thought of the shadow self she'd just defeated, of the corrupted path she might have taken if she'd chosen power over love. Then she thought of children laughing in a schoolhouse, of wolves who'd found the courage to trust again, of a man whose steadfast faith had never wavered even when hers did. "I'm willing," she said quietly, "but I want to change things." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Change what?" "The ceremony. Instead of the pack swearing loyalty to me, I want to swear loyalty to them. A Luna's job isn't to rule, it's to serve." Elder Thompson's eyes went wide with surprise, then crinkled with something that might have been pride. "That has never been done before." "Then it's time for something new." Aria stood, the heart of the pack cradled against her chest like a promise. "If I'm going to be Luna, I want to do it right." As they walked back through the forest toward pack lands, Marcus caught her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Aria considered the question as she watched sunlight dance through the leaves overhead. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a failed wolf living in exile, convinced she had nothing to offer anyone. Now she was preparing to lead a pack into an uncertain future, armed with nothing but love and the fierce determination to protect what mattered most. None, she said, and meant it. The full moon was still 2 days away, but she could already feel it calling to her, not with the desperate hunger she'd once known, but with the patient certainty of power that knew its purpose. She was Aria Blackwood, Luna of the Crescent Moon Pack. And she was finally home. Chapter 11. The full moon hung like a silver coin in the velvet sky, casting the ceremonial grounds in ethereal light. Every member of the Crescent Moon Pack had gathered in the ancient stone circle where their ancestors had performed the same sacred rituals for over 2 centuries. But tonight was different. Tonight, everything would change. Aria stood at the edge of the circle, dressed in the traditional Luna gown that had been worn by pack leaders for generations. The fabric was woven with actual silver thread that caught and held moonlight, making her appear to glow from within. Her dark hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders, crowned with a circlet of moonstone that pulsed with inner fire. She looked every inch the Luna she was meant to be, but her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. Second thoughts. Marcus appeared beside her, magnificent in his ceremonial alpha regalia. His dark suit was cut to emphasize his powerful frame, and the silver torque around his throat marked him as pack leader. But it was his gray eyes that held her attention, warm with love and absolute faith in her abilities. Third and fourth thoughts, she admitted, smoothing her hands over the silk gown. What if they reject the changes to the ceremony? What if they think I'm being presumptuous? Then they're fools, he said simply, lifting her hand to brush a kiss across her knuckles. But they won't. You've already proven yourself 10 times over. Through the trees, she could see the pack members taking their places around the ceremonial circle. Families clustered together, children sitting cross-legged on blankets, while their parents stood in formal ranks. The sight should have been comforting, but Aria caught glimpses of uncertain faces, worried whispers. They're nervous, she observed. So are you. The difference is they're nervous about change, while you're nervous about letting them down. Marcus squeezed her hand. Trust me, love. Trust yourself. Elder Thompson approached them, carrying an ornate silver chalice filled with moon water, spring water that had been blessed under 13 full moons. His ancient face was solemn but kind. It's time, Luna, he said formally. Are you ready to claim your destiny? Aria took a deep breath, drawing strength from Marcus's steady presence beside her. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, from outcast to exile to the woman who'd saved her pack from ancient evil. Every moment of pain, every struggle, had been preparing her for this. I'm ready, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. They walked into the circle together, Marcus on her right as Alpha, Thompson on her left as Elder. The pack fell silent, 300 pairs of eyes tracking their movement. At the circle's center stood an altar carved from pure white stone, its surface inscribed with lunar symbols that seemed to move in the flickering torchlight. Pack of the Crescent Moon, Thompson's voice carried clearly across the grounds. We gather tonight to witness the ascension of our Luna, Aria Blackwood, she who walks in silver light. A rustle of movement as the pack members shifted, some nodding approval, others still uncertain. Aria caught sight of Melissa Carver near the front, her expression unreadable but no longer openly hostile. The old ways speak of a Luna who rules through power, Thompson continued, his words carrying the weight of ancient tradition. But tonight, we witness something new, a Luna who chooses to lead through service. Now the whispers started in earnest. This was unprecedented territory, a fundamental shift in how pack hierarchy had always worked. Aria stepped forward, her voice carrying across the sacred space with supernatural clarity. I stand before you not as your superior, but as your servant. Not as your ruler, but as your protector. She moved to the center of the circle, the moonstone circlet catching silver light until it blazed like a crown of stars. When she spoke again, power thrummed through her words, not the commanding force of dominance, but something deeper and more resonant. 3 weeks ago, You cast me out as weak, unworthy of pack membership. You weren't wrong. I was weak in all the ways that mattered. I couldn't shift, couldn't contribute, couldn't find my place among you. A few pack members shifted uncomfortably, remembering their part in her exile. But weakness isn't permanent, Aria continued, silver light beginning to emanate from her skin in gentle waves. Strength can be learned, courage can be chosen, and family can be earned. She lifted the heart of the pack crystal from the altar, its restored purity catching moonlight like captured starfire. This holds the essence of every soul in our pack. Your memories, your dreams, your bonds to one another. When corruption threatened to destroy it, you trusted me to save it. Not because I was strongest, but because I was willing to risk everything for the wolves I love. The crystal pulsed with warm light, and through it, every pack member could feel the truth of her words resonating in their bones. So I ask you now, Aria said, extending the crystal toward the assembled wolves, not to kneel before me, but to stand with me. Not to swear obedience, but to share in the promise I make tonight. She raised her face to the full moon overhead, silver light pouring from her in waves that washed over the entire gathering. I, Aria Blackwood, Luna of the Crescent Moon Pack, swear by moon and star and the bonds that make us family, I will protect you with my life, guide you with wisdom earned through trial, and love you with a heart that knows no limits. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flowed from the pack to their Luna, not submission, but freely given strength. 300 voices rose in harmony, speaking words that had never been said in any Luna ceremony. We stand with you. We share your burden. We are pack, and pack endures. The magic of it hit like lightning, sealing bonds deeper than blood, stronger than death. Silver light exploded outward from the circle's center, washing over pack lands and beyond, marking territory and pack members alike with the blessing of a Luna who served rather than ruled. When the light faded, Aria stood transformed. The circlet on her brow had become something more, a crown of living moonlight that marked her as Luna not through conquest, but through love earned and freely given. The pack erupted in celebration, voices raised in howls of joy that echoed across the mountains. Children ran forward to touch her hands, warriors bowed not in submission but in respect, elders smiled with tears streaming down weathered faces. But Aria only had eyes for Marcus, who stood watching her with an expression of such profound love and pride that it took her breath away. My Luna, he said softly, and in those 2 words she heard everything: respect, desire, devotion, and the promise of a future they would build together. Your courage is one of the things I love most about you. I love you too, she whispered, the words carrying the weight of absolute truth. I love your strength and your gentleness, your wisdom and your terrible jokes. I love how you saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself. They moved together like dancers following ancient choreography, hands intertwining as they spoke the ritual words that would bind their souls for eternity. By moon and star, by earth and flame, I take you as my mate, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. By silver light and golden dawn, by pack and family, I take you as mine, Aria replied, power thrumming through the sacred words. The mate bond snapped into place between them with almost physical force, a connection deeper than thought, stronger than death. Suddenly Aria could feel Marcus's emotions as clearly as her own, sense his thoughts like whispers in her mind. The sensation was overwhelming and perfect, and absolutely right. My Luna, his mental voice caressed her consciousness like silk. My Alpha, she replied, marveling at the intimacy of sharing thoughts as well as hearts. They kissed then, deep and desperate, and full of promises that would take lifetimes to fulfill. Silver light erupted around them as their powers merged, lunar fire twining with alpha authority to create something new and magnificent. When they finally broke apart, both were glowing with the aftermath of completed bonding. The mate mark had appeared on Aria's throat, a silver crescent moon that proclaimed her as Marcus's chosen mate. His own mark was more subtle, visible only as a faint shimmer across his collarbone, but it carried the same meaning. They belonged to each other now, completely and forever. "Ready to go back?" Marcus asked, though his hands were reluctant to leave her skin. "Are you?" "Because I'm thinking this grove is very private, and we have a lot of bonding to catch up on." Aria let her voice trail off suggestively, enjoying the way his gray eyes darkened with desire. "Tempting," he growled, pulling her flush against his chest. "But our pack is waiting to celebrate their Luna and Alpha. We owe them that much." "Later then," she promised, rising on her toes to nip at his earlobe. "Much, much later." His answering groan was deeply satisfying. They returned to the ceremonial grounds to find the entire pack gathered in celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of traditional feast foods, children ran shrieking between the adults' legs, and someone had broken out instruments for dancing. The moment Marcus and Aria appeared, the crowd erupted in cheers. "The mate bond was my alpha," she replied, reaching for him as the pack celebrated around them. But before their lips could meet, a new voice cut through the revelry. "Wait." Melissa Carver stepped forward, her face pale but determined. The pack fell silent, tension crackling through the air like electricity. This was the moment Aria had been dreading, the challenge that could tear apart everything she'd just built. "I have something to say," Melissa announced, her voice carrying clearly across the ceremonial grounds. Aria braced herself for accusations, for demands that the ceremony be declared invalid, for anything that might shatter this perfect moment. Instead, Melissa dropped to one knee. "I was wrong," she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. "I let jealousy and pride blind me to what was right in front of us. You aren't the Luna we expected, Aria. You're the Luna we needed." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I challenge any who would question your right to lead us. You've proven yourself beyond doubt, and I'm honored to serve under your protection." The gesture sent shockwaves through the pack. If Melissa Carver, proud, ambitious, and formerly Aria's greatest rival, could acknowledge her as Luna, then any remaining opposition crumbled to dust. One by one, other pack members followed Melissa's example, not in the formal submission of old traditions, but in the respectful acknowledgement of a leader who had earned their trust through sacrifice and love. As the last challenger knelt, Marcus stepped forward and offered Aria his hand. "Shall we finish what we started?" he asked, his eyes dancing with mischief and desire. "We shall," she replied, taking his hand as the pack looked on with joy and anticipation. The mating ceremony was about to begin. Chapter 12. The ceremonial grounds had been transformed for the mating ritual. Flower petals scattered the ancient stone circle, their fragrance mingling with the wild scent of night-blooming jasmine. Torches cast dancing shadows on the altar where Marcus and Aria would pledge themselves to each other for eternity. But first came the private ceremony, the moment when Alpha and Luna would complete the mate bond away from watching eyes. They walked hand in hand through moonlit forest paths to the sacred grove where pack leaders had been mated for generations. Ancient oaks formed a natural cathedral around a pool of spring water that reflected the stars like scattered diamonds. "Nervous?" Marcus asked as they reached the grove's heart. Aria considered the question. 3 hours ago, she'd been terrified of claiming the Luna role. Now, standing with the man she loved under a canopy of stars, she felt only peaceful certainty. "No," she said, turning to face him. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Marcus smiled, not his alpha mask of controlled authority, but the genuine expression of a man completely at peace with his world. "I love you, Aria Blackwood. I've loved you since the night you faced down a rogue to save a stranger. I'll love you through every challenge we face as mates, every joy we share as partners, every moment we have together." "Even when I'm being stubborn and reckless?" she asked, remembering his words from that night at the cottage. "Especially then." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. Visible to supernatural senses, silver threads connecting Alpha and Luna in patterns too beautiful for human eyes to fully process. "Speech," someone called from the crowd. Speech from the Luna. Aria looked around at the faces surrounding her, wolves who'd once scorned her, now beaming with genuine joy. Children who'd hidden from her, now reaching out to touch her hands. Elders who'd questioned her worthiness, now nodding with deep respect. 3 weeks ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the grounds, I stood in this very circle as an outcast, convinced I had nothing to offer anyone. Tonight, I stand here as your Luna, mate to your Alpha, blessed beyond measure by the family I've found among you. Applause rippled through the crowd, but she held up a hand for silence. The journey from outcast to Luna taught me something important, she continued, silver light beginning to dance around her fingers. Strength isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to grow, to change, to become who we're meant to be. She gestured to the pack surrounding her, warriors and healers, children and elders, all united by bonds deeper than blood. Each of you contributed to who I became. Your challenges made me stronger. Your acceptance gave me purpose. Your trust gave me courage. I may wear the Luna's crown, but I could never have earned it alone. The crowd was silent now, hanging on her every word. So tonight, as we celebrate new bonds and new beginnings, I want you to remember something. Your pack, your family, you are the reason Alphas lead and Lunas serve, because you are worth every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt overcome by love. The howl that rose from 300 throats shook the mountains themselves. It was the sound of a pack united, of wolves who had found their true Luna at last. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus pulled Aria aside to a quiet corner where they could watch their people dance under the stars. Any regrets? He asked, echoing the question from days ago. Aria looked around at the scene before her, children learning traditional dances from their grandparents, young couples stealing kisses in shadowed corners, warriors sharing stories of battles won and lost. The air rang with laughter and music and the comfortable chaos of family gatherings. At the center of it all, Elder Thompson was regaling a group of youngsters with the story of their Luna's rise, how an outcast became a hero, how the moon itself blessed a heart brave enough to love without limits. None, she said, settling against Marcus's solid warmth. Not a single one. Through their mate bond, she felt his deep contentment, his pride in her and in the pack they would lead together. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and joys, struggles and triumphs, all the messy complications of leading supernatural beings through an increasingly complex world. But they would face it together. Alpha and Luna, mates and partners, bound by silver light and golden love. The full moon smiled down on the crescent moon pack as they celebrated the girl who'd risen from exile to claim her destiny. And in the sacred grove where ancient oaks whispered secrets to the wind, two souls danced to music only they could hear. Aria Blackwood had finally found her way home. The knock on the Luna's office door was tentative, uncertain. Aria looked up from the territorial dispute reports she'd been reviewing to see a young woman hovering in the doorway, maybe 19, with tangled auburn hair and clothes that had seen better weeks. More importantly, she reeked of rogue. Luna Blackwood? The girl said hesitantly. I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard you might help someone like me. Aria set aside her paperwork and really looked at the stranger. Thin from poor nutrition, exhausted from sleeping rough, but there was something in her green eyes that Aria recognized, the desperate hope of someone who'd been cast out and was trying to find her way home. Someone like you? Aria asked gently. A wolf who can't shift properly. Who got kicked out for being defective. The girl's voice cracked on the last word. I know I don't have any right to ask, but I heard stories about the Luna, who used to be an outcast. I thought maybe... Aria stood, moving around her desk to face the young rogue directly. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah Chun. The girl lifted her chin with fragile pride. I know I'm nothing special, but I can work hard. I can learn. I just need someone to give me a chance. Through the window, Aria could see Marcus leading a training session in the main courtyard. 6 months of leadership had only made him more magnificent, confident in his role as Alpha, secure in their partnership. He'd support whatever decision she made about the rogue girl. "Tell me, Sarah," Aria said, remembering another broken girl who'd once knelt in this very pack's ceremonial circle. "Are you willing to do whatever it takes to find your wolf? Even if it means discovering you're something completely different than what you expected?" Hope blazed in the girl's green eyes. "Yes, Luna. Anything." Aria smiled, seeing past and future converging in this moment. Sarah was a Moonborn, she could sense that much, but she was something powerful and unique that had been overlooked by wolves too narrow-minded to see potential. "Welcome to the Crescent Moon Pack, Sarah Chun," she said formally. "Let's find out what you're really meant to be." As she led the girl toward the guest quarters where she could rest and recover, Aria felt the familiar warmth of destiny shifting into new patterns. The pack was growing, changing, becoming something better than it had ever been before. And at the heart of it all, a former outcast who'd learned that the greatest strength lay not in ruling others, but in lifting them up. The moon smiled down on the Crescent Moon Pack, where outcasts became family and broken wolves learned to fly. The end.